Good afternoon, members of the media here in Washington, and to those joining us online from South Africa and elsewhere. Welcome to the final press conference of the finance track under South Africa's G20 presidency. Over the past 2 days, finance ministers and central bank governors have been meeting here in Washington, D.C. for the fourth meeting of the finance track. To the colleagues, we have published the chair's summary. It is available on the South African Reserve Bank's website, reservebank.co.za, and also on the National Treasury's website, just for ease of reference. For members of the media to also note that the Minister of Finance of South Africa could not join us for this meeting as he had other commitments at home. But let me introduce our panel for this afternoon, who will be taking us through some of the achievements of the finance track since we took over the presidency, and some of the discussions that we had over the past 2 days. To my immediate left, we have the Director General of the National Treasury, Dr. Duncan Pieterse. Next to him is the Deputy Minister of Finance, David Masondo. We have the South African Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago, and the Deputy Governor, Rashad Kasim. I will now allow for the Deputy Minister to give us some opening remarks, and following that, we will then open it up for questions. DM, over to you.
No, thanks, Mahlatsi. I'll read the media advisory that we have issued, because we assume that not all of you have the copy, and particularly the viewers at home. And it reads as follows, and thereafter will be under the dictatorship of Mahlatsi on how we take the conversation forward. So the statement reads as follows. The fourth meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, chaired jointly by myself and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago, took place on 15 and 16 October 2025 on the sidelines of the IMF and the World Bank Annual Meetings here in Washington, D.C. This was the final finance ministers and central bank governors meeting of the South African G20 presidency. As a key legacy of South Africa's presidency, ministers and central bank governors agreed to launch the G20 Africa Engagement Framework. This framework strives to ensure consistent engagement by the G20 with key impediments to growth and development in Africa for the next 5 years. It complements existing G20 initiatives, such as the Compact with Africa. Ministers also signed up to the first ever G20 Ministerial Declaration on Debt Sustainability, which signals the intent of the G20 to do more to tackle unsustainable levels of debt along the rising cost of capital, particularly for African countries. The meeting delivered constructive discussions on the global economic outlook, the macroeconomic stability, the international financial architecture, and financial sector issues. The meeting also received an update on the work of the Africa Expert Panel. Further details on the discussions are recorded in the chair summary of the meeting, which is now available on the G20 website. The chair's summary also contains a list of deliverables achieved under the South African G20 presidency within the finance track. Amid rising geopolitical tensions and fragmentation, South Africa prioritized global cooperation and development with a special focus on Africa. Our presidency theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainability, reflected the current global context and the priorities of the previous 3 developing country presidency, that is Brazil, India, and Indonesia, which focused on issues critical to the global south. We have emphasized the need for global policy responses that reflect the lived realities of emerging markets and developing economies, including low growth, constrained fiscal space, rising debt service costs, and limited access to long-term affordable capital. Our focus on Africa permeated the finance track, where significant progress has been achieved, advancing the multilateral development bank roadmap to make them bigger, better, and more effective for developing countries. Members also adopted the G20 declaration on debt that aims to improve debt sustainability and commit to engage with borrower countries while enhancing their agency. Work with the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable provided additional technical inputs and further strengthened Africa's voice. For South Africa and other developing countries, the developmental commitments made during the first cycle of developing countries' presidencies must be carried forward beyond 2026, ensuring the G20 remains relevant and effective in a divided world. The South African presidency has also advanced discussions on artificial intelligence, examining it from both a regulatory and a macroeconomic perspective to understand productivity and growth implications of harnessing technology and AI. There's broad agreement that further work needs to be done. Our financial sector discussions highlighted both the transformative potential and the risks associated with innovation and AI. Cross-border payments was a key priority this year, and we have collectively reaffirmed our commitment to effective implementation of the G20 roadmap for enhancing cross-border payments, as well as appropriate further actions as necessary to deliver the roadmap's targets. Indeed, we are slowly making progress towards the quest for cheaper, faster, more transparent and inclusive payments, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. Over the year, members advanced several other areas of important work across a number of groups and work streams, which will improve global economic cooperation. This included advances in financial inclusion, moving consumers from access to usage of financial products, continued progress in sustainable financing, and multi-year sustainable finance roadmap tools for expanding quality infrastructure investment, including cross-border infrastructure toolkit and the related Ubuntu initiative. There was productive engagement on coordination between finance and health ministries and continued coordination on international taxation. Finally, members welcomed a review of G20 finance track processes conducted by the South African presidency ensuring that the G20 finance track remains the premier forum for the global economic cooperation. The G20 continues to play an important role in fostering stability, inclusion, and sustainability in the international system. We are confident that the work carried forward from this presidency will strengthen our shared efforts to build a more equitable, resilient, and prosperous global economy. South Africa will host the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg in November, and we're looking forward to seeing many of you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. We will now open it up for questions. For those in the room, if you could put your hands up, a roaming mic will come to you. And then please just state your name and your designation as well. The journalists that are online, they can use the chat function, and I will read up the questions, and then I will give the Deputy Minister the powers to decide who answers those questions that come forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Nayan. I'm with Indo-Asian News Service. I have a question regarding US-China trade war, which is underway right now. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent yesterday said that there will be a global wholesome response to Chinese export controls on rare earths. My question is that did the US side raise those concerns in the G20 meeting? Sorry, should I continue? So my question is, did the US side raise those concerns in the G20 meeting, and what is South Africa's position as the chair of G20? Thank you, Chair.
All right, DM?
DG, do you want to take it?
Well, thank you, DM. Well, I think the question was really about whether that was raised in the context of the G20 discussions, and the short answer is no. Trade was, of course, discussed in the framework working group itself, and the outcome of those discussions are reflected in two places. One in the chair's summary that you have in front of you today, in the Global Economic Outlook section, as well as in the communique that was agreed upon in Durban. And I'll refer you to the fourth paragraph of today's chair summary to give you a sense of how those discussions ended up. And the key point I would highlight here is the fact that the line that talks about the way that we need to, A, address excessive imbalances throughout the world, but do so in a way that contributes to an open global economy and without compromising sustainable global growth. And then both this chair summary as well as the declaration from Durban earlier this year spoke about the importance of the WTO to advance trade issues and acknowledge that the agreed upon rules in the WTO are integral as part of the global trading system. So if you read through the language that you find in this chair summary, that will give you a sense of how those matters, to the extent that they were raised in our discussions, were resolved by the G20 members through their deliberations.
Okay. Let's take two at a time. As I will take the gentleman over here and then the lady in front.
Hi, my name is Magnus Sherman. I'm with Octus in London. I wanted to touch on the point about preferred creditor status. Some of the current African debt restructurings are being held up by certain African institutions claiming preferred creditor status. Was that discussed during the meetings, and are we any closer to a sharper definition of what constitutes PCS?
Okay.
Hello. Fung Skovgaard from InvestGain Media from London. You were talking about technology and innovation. And we talk a lot about AI, but I would like to understand whether you have mentioned blockchain. Blockchains mean, I'm referring to digital bonds. is a way to raise capital for countries and also to help G20.
Okay.
DG Shad, you want to start? Yeah, blockchain. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think that what is important about the G20 is an issue that is relevant for the G20 community that has cross-border implications. So one of the reasons why we have a discussion at the G20 on financial innovation is because there are two facets to it. The first is that financial innovation has cross-border implications. We know that with stable coins, for example, what you do in one country can have an impact on the other country. The second issue is we all get worried about regulatory arbitrage. So if one country introduces a regulation that's slightly more developed than the other, they're different, you want to be able to ensure that you don't have, you don't contribute to illegal capital flows and so on. We're not committed at the G20 to a technology choice. So blockchain is very important. I think the G20 has a very critical discussion of how should we globally think about crypto assets? How should we globally think about stable coins? And it is a forum for different countries to air their views. Some are more enthusiastic about introducing legislation now. Some play the, celebrate the positive side. Others may celebrate, may raise caution about the negative side. So the conversation is a broader conversation on financial innovation, of it. Blockchain would be a part of it, but I don't think we get into the details of blockchain. It's more the overarching concerns and benefits about financial innovation. It's a follow-up there, I think.
Okay, can...
Not about stable coins, not about cryptos, not about coins or anything, just doing digital bonds so everyone can, because we are talking about saving. Actually, right now we have a case study as Prince Albert in your country privately, and it is working, and that's what we try to hear your view on how to replicate. Because we have a framework, we have a case study. So we are talking about digital bonds. We are not talking about cryptos or coins.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is quite a narrow topic. We haven't really discussed it. As I said, it's been a more overarching discussion on innovation. Thank you.
Okay. As part of our modernization, we had run some tests. We had experimented with using a blockchain technology in the payment space, where we were able to tokenize the payments, and we proved that we could actually settle the volume that we would normally settle in a day within an hour. That volume would be settled. We took that project further, because you talked about a digital bond, and we tested it with the South African Reserve Bank debentures, where we tokenized the debentures, digitized them, and it was proved that it could actually be done fast. But for this thing to fully work, you actually needed to modernize the entire payment system. And so we are busy with the payment ecosystem modernization. It's a big project which is preceded by the establishment of a payments utility, which was formerly known as BankServe, which is now Pay Inc. So you're going to be using that. So in that ecosystem, over and above the utility, you're going to be introducing a digital ID and all of that stuff. So your question was very narrow. It was about a bond. We have tested this with payments. We have tested it with debentures. The next phase was testing with the treasury bills of the treasury. But we are doing an entire payments ecosystem modernization.
There was a question which requires DG's answer. I think it was from you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Matt.
Yes, happy to come in on that. So the question was about whether the issue of preferred creditor status was discussed at all during the course of the presidency. And it came up in a few different areas. Number one, of course, within the context of the common framework for debt restructuring. That's an issue that was discussed there. And just to alert you to the fact that we do have a few, if you go to the annexure of the chair's summary, you will find some of the reports that were produced as part of the outputs of the G20 presidency for South Africa. And one of those were the fact sheets for the common framework for debt treatment, where we did a few case studies where these issues were raised. And I think the important point to make there, and sorry, I should add that there was also a side event on private creditors' involvement in common framework debt restructuring that was done with the Paris Club earlier this year as well. And I think the key issue to mention there is that from our perspective, as we say in the statement as well, the common framework remains the key vehicle through which these kinds of debt restructuring happens. It also remains the mechanism through which issues such as the preferential creditor status is discussed and how that is managed. And I think the other point to make is that we are heartened by the progress that the common framework has made over the last few years in terms of its ability to resolve these debt restructurings a lot more quickly than was the case with the first few. If you look at the experience of the latest countries versus some of those who came very early on, like Chad and others. So certainly there has been progress. It remains on the agenda of the G20, and it remains a discussion for further refinement, including how preferential creditor status is handled within the context of the common framework.
Okay, I've got a question online, and it's from Stephanie Sung, Chief Correspondent from Tax Notes Today, International, USA. What was discussed regarding the Pillar 2 side-by-side tax proposal put forth by the G7, and how confident are you that an OECD inclusive framework agreement on the proposal will be reached by the end of the year? Yeah?
Do you want to take that, Chair?
Yeah, well, it's going to be difficult for us to anticipate whether an OECD agreement will be reached before the end of the year. That is up to the members of the OECD and probably better directed at the OECD themselves. The OECD has also been a key partner for us in the tax discussions this year. But one of the deliberate steps we have taken is to bring together both the voices of the OECD as well as broader voices in the form of pulling the UN agencies closer to the discussion. So all I would say is at this stage it's early to anticipate whether that agreement will be reached, but certainly those discussions are going to be taken further by the OECD members.
Okay, we've got two more, about 6 minutes to go. Can we take the question in front? And the lady at the back as well. Yep. Okay, we can start there and come there.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Kemi Oshikoya with the Africa Bazaar magazine. My question to you is regarding how is the G20 addressing credit rating biases that raises African borrowing cost? And the other part of the question is, what reform to multilateral development banks is the G20 under the South Africa presidency championing to unlock more concessional and blended finance for Africa? Thank you very much.
Okay, who's taking that one?
Okay, I can start. So I think on the issue of the credit rating agencies and the voice of African borrowers in particular, I think there are 3 points worth highlighting here. The one is that you will notice that in the Ministerial Declaration on Debt Sustainability, there's a very particular reference to enhancing the voice of borrower countries. It is an initiative that's recognized both within the context of the G20, but also, as you would know, there's a global initiative underway led by the UN, Egypt and Zambia to create a platform to raise the voice of borrower countries in these negotiations. Secondly, the issue of credit ratings has, of course, also been raised by the G20 Africa expert panel. So if you look at the report that was submitted by former Minister Trevor Manuel, there are some very specific recommendations in that regard, and they draw on some of the literature that demonstrates the biases that do exist there. From our perspective, through the Africa Engagement Framework, which was adopted and which the Deputy Minister spoke about earlier, where G20 members will, for the next few presidencies, have an opportunity to choose from a menu of policy options insofar as they relate to Africa. One of those is, of course, the cost of capital. And we are certain that that is an issue that will be picked up by one of the upcoming presidencies, where the kind of issues that you've raised, both on the role of credit rating agencies, enhancing the voice of borrower countries, and also extending concessional finance via MDBs will be taken forward as part of the G20's agenda. And I'm sure that the Africa G20 expert panel, whose work will continue and where all the key Africa agencies are represented, UNECA, AFDB, AU, and so on, will also ensure that they prioritize this in their work going forward. Thanks.
Okay, Eden Harris, Financial Times, the banker. My question is for you, Governor. What is South Africa doing to protect South Africans from bad actors who prey on the banking institutions that basically are vulnerable to hackers? So, like, what are you doing to protect your consumers from hackers who prey on developing countries?
Okay, I think that just to conclude on what the DG was saying about the rating agencies. There is a global standard set by IOSCO that is supposed to regulate the conduct of the rating agencies. And so in evaluating the behavior of the rating agencies, you've got to look at that in that context. The second is that rating agencies have got to be transparent in their methodologies. And if they're transparent in their methodologies, I say, at least I could speak from the South African perspective, we are able to take their methodology and take the data they are using and see whether we are able to replicate it, and we can actually engage them and challenge them based on their methodology and say that your rating is wrong. And so if you were to look at South Africa now, and you look at the reports of the rating agencies when they downgraded South Africa in 2017 and 2020, their trajectory was that debt to GDP in South Africa will reach 94%. In the case of one agency, it said that we might actually reach 100. 8 years later, we are at 76%. So they were wrong. So you need to be able to engage with them on that basis. Now, not all countries, especially developing countries, have got the ability to take the methodology of the rating agencies, test its robustness, confront the rating agencies with the data. And I can tell you now, we are capable of saying, based on your methodology and the data that we have, your rating is wrong. This is what we think our rating should actually be. And that is the power that the borrowers actually need. Now, for many of the developing countries, they would not have that ability. And important here would be to build the capacity of the borrowers to be able to engage in that manner. And if they can't engage directly, whether you create capacity that can be availed to the borrowers so that the borrowers would be able to engage in that manner. Question about the protecting consumers against hacking. Hacking will take place. There are bad guys out there. And the issue of cybersecurity had become very important. And through the structure of the BIS and the Financial Stability Board, we have got the cybersecurity reporting task. If any one of us has experienced a cyber incident, we have got a mechanism of sharing that information and seeing what lessons are learned and how you actually respond to that. It then becomes the responsibility of the individual institutions to put in place checks and balances and controls to protect their customers. That you will be hacked is a given. You can put all sorts of defenses. That you will be hacked, it will happen. There will be a hack. The question is, when it happens, how quickly are you able to respond to that? And I'm saying this decidedly because there had been advanced economy agencies that had been hacked. So that is what you are going to be faced with. And on the consumer side, it is also very important that consumers are actually informed and equipped to be able to engage. Because in many respects, it is not so much that the institution got hacked. It is because the consumer didn't know what was the right thing to do when approached or tricked into some vulnerability, and they click on the wrong link, and you end up with a situation. So globally, we need the cooperation as policymakers, and country specific. You need legislation that would govern this, and the institutions themselves have got to put mechanisms in place to do this. And lastly, the consumers need to be made aware of what the vulnerabilities are and how they can protect themselves against that.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we do have our principals with us. If there are any specific questions that you want answered, just come to me and we'll try and arrange it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and we do look forward to seeing you in South Africa in November. Thank you.
crises they have faced in terms of cost, and we still have not heard crickets out of any negotiation with Johnson or with Thune. The Republicans are on the defensive. They keep changing their stories and changing their arguments, but we are on the side of the American people.
We thank Leader Schumer and Senate Democrats for continuing to stand up strongly and boldly in defense of the health care of the American people. The partisan Republican spending bill that guts the health care of the American people has now been defeated a total of 10 times. Yet, Senate Republicans continue to do the same exact thing and expect different results. That's the classic definition of legislative insanity. The problem is Republicans aren't serious as it relates to solving the affordable health care crisis that they've created, solving the cost of living crisis that they've made worse. As Democrats, we've made clear we will sit down anytime, any place with anyone to find a bipartisan path forward to reopening the government, standing by our hardworking federal civil servants, enacting a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people, and decisively addressing the Republican health care crisis, which is devastating everyday Americans all across the country.
Nothing's. Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Apparently, Leader Thune has said that he's open to holding a vote at a set date. So 2 questions. One, are you open to that? What do you, as Democrats, need to see? And I think that's my 2 questions.
Look, we're not negotiating in public, plain and simple. And Leader Thune has not come to me with any proposal at this point.
Leader Schumer. Leader Schumer, do you have a good enough idea of how this defense bill will be packaged with possibly labor HHS to allow Democrats to vote to get on that defense bill today?
Right now, the only thing that is on the floor is just the defense bill. Thune needs unanimous consent to add anything else to it. We don't even know if he'll get that. It's always been unacceptable to Democrats to do the defense bill without other bills that have so many things that are important to the American people in terms of health care, in terms of housing, in terms of safety.
Leader Schumer, are you? Leader Schumer, good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You are correct.
Yeah, well, we try to be correct in journalism. That said,
sometimes.
The Republicans continue to say that this shutdown is because you're worried about Ocasio-Cortez and the left. She even said last night she is not primary. How does that make you feel?
Look, the bottom line is we are fighting for the American people. We see the anguish they face everywhere we go, in our districts, in our states. People are not just, oh, this is something new and not so good. They think it's horrible. What am I going to do? With so many, another person I met, the kid has cancer, and the treatment has been cut off, the research has been cut off. We are fighting for the American people. The Republicans can talk all the political stuff they want. We're on the side of the American people because they need help.
From the very beginning of this crisis, Senate Democrats and House Democrats have made clear we are fighting to address the health care crisis that Republicans have created, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, as part of the Republican One Big Ugly Bill that hurts everyday Americans in order to benefit their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks. Hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health centers are closing all across America because of Republican policies. That's hurting everyday Americans. Their refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits is going to result in tens of millions of people in Republican-held states, Democratic states, purple states, all across the country. It doesn't matter. Tens of millions of people are going to experience dramatically increased premiums, co-pays, and deductibles. It's going to make health care unaffordable for people. They will be unable to see their doctor or take their children to see a doctor when they need one. That's not acceptable in this country. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So Democrats are standing up to address the cost of living crisis that Republican policies like the Trump tariffs have made worse, and we're standing up in defense of the health care of the American people.
Mr. Leader, have you, or neither of you as leaders,
received
a Gang of 8 briefing on the CIA activity in Venezuela?
No, and it's typical of this administration and this Republican House and Senate They try to just go at it alone on everything. That doesn't work. That's not the American way. That's not what the American people want. They want us to come together and come up with bipartisan solutions, and they have failed every step of the way. On the extension of the Affordable Care Act, we asked them to vote 3 times to extend it. They voted no. And the Republican congressmen and senators are feeling the heat from their constituencies because this crisis is so bad. And so you see them squirming and changing their positions and not always agreeing with one another. We are steadfast. We're on the side of the American people because health care is one of the most important things. When you ask people, their number one concern is cost, and Trump's done a lot to raise their costs on tariffs and on heating, and grocery prices are still high. But the number one issue in terms of cost to the American people now is health care. And it's a matter of life and death. A matter of life and death. Yes.
You talk about finding bipartisan cooperation. There was a bipartisan deal in the Senate on this defense appropriations bill. It passed overwhelmingly out of committee. If it's on the floor today, why won't Senate Democrats vote?
Because we need to make sure they have, first of all, we have always believed, we believe that we need a strong defense, but we believe we need strong health care. We need strong safety for the American people. We need strong programs that help them with so many other issues, mental health and education. And we have always negotiated these agreements, these appropriation agreements in a bipartisan way. Once again, they're just going at it alone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Their approach has been my way or the highway from the very beginning, and we just continue to maintain the position. We will sit down, have a bipartisan discussion to reopen the government, to address the Republican health care crisis, and to enact a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people. Because the American people are suffering under these policies that have made life more expensive for them. Trump promised to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down, they've gone up. Electricity prices skyrocketing through the roof. Housing still too expensive. Grocery costs too high. And now they want to stick it to the American people in terms of these health care premiums. It's all unacceptable. Cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save health care.
And just on a procedural issue, so you all know, they need unanimous consent to add something to the defense bill. They don't have it.
Thank you.
And of course, it's so great to have both of you here. We have so many audience questions tonight, really good ones. And Senator Sanders, just in terms of how long this shutdown has gone on, you and I have spoken multiple times during this, but we're now on the 15th day. The 9th vote to reopen the government failed. Do you think Speaker Johnson is right when he says that this could be one of the longest government shutdowns in U.S. history?
No. I think the Republicans are catching on that you can't throw 15 million Americans off of the health care they have. And studies indicate that when you do that, some 50,000 Americans a year will die unnecessarily. And then on top of that, just in Vermont today, Caitlin, people in my state and all over this country are beginning to receive notices from insurance companies about what their new premiums will be if we do not stop what Trump is doing. In my state of Vermont, there are people today who receive notices that their premiums are going to quadruple. Quadruple. Some less, 3 times. In my state of Vermont, and again, this is true in many parts of the country, middle-class families will be paying $50,000 a year for health care. Anyone think that's sane? It's not. Who can afford that? Republicans are catching on. They're playing a losing hand. They are going to come to the table finally and address the health care crisis that they've created.
Okay, so you think Republicans will come to the table sooner rather than later. The White House has not indicated as much, and today the budget director, Russ Vought, said that north of 10,000 federal workers could be laid off during this government shutdown. Does that make Democrats rethink their strategy at all?
I don't think so. I think that what Russ Vought just announced today in the laying off of federal workers, we learned today a judge has put a temporary restraining order because it is likely illegal what he and the Trump administration is doing. The problem is that this administration, the Trump administration, folks like Russ Vought, they think that destroying our health care, making sure that housing is too expensive to live in, that jacking up the costs of our groceries, they think all of this is about hurting Democrats. What they are doing is hurting Americans, and they are hurting this country. And if Mike Johnson wants to say that this shutdown is going to last a long time, it is because he is choosing to punish the American people, and we cannot stand for it, and we cannot allow it. And we also cannot enable it by acquiescing and enabling the behavior of bullies. So it ends today.
So
if I could just add to something Alexandria said.
Go ahead, Senator.
This is the cynicism of the Speaker of the House.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your Republican colleagues tonight? They're back here in Washington negotiating?
That's an excellent question, Bernie. Right now, House Democrats are in Washington, D.C. Senate Democrats are in Washington, D.C. Even Senate Republicans, I believe, are still in Washington, D.C. The only people who are not in Washington, D.C. are the over 200 elected Republicans in the House of Representatives, because Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, refuses to call the House in session. He refuses to also seat Adelita Grijalva because they want to prevent the 218th signature on release of the Epstein files as well.
Can I ask you on that? Because Speaker Johnson was asked about that today, and he said it has nothing to do with that. It's so she can have all the pomp and circumstance that is afforded to most members when they're sworn in. You don't believe that?
No, Mike Johnson has sworn in several members, Republican members, in pro forma sessions. He understands that the importance of this country, the importance of representation, is not about pomp and circumstance. And in fact, it's not just about Representative Grijalva. It's about the over 700,000 people in the state of Arizona, veterans, seniors, teachers, students, who do not have anyone to call in an emergency because their elected representative that has been certified at municipal, state, and the federal level with federal acknowledgement, he refuses to seat a duly elected official here in the House of Representatives.
So we have a lot of questions tonight for people who are here in Washington. And Representative Ocasio-Cortez, this first question is for you. This is Alicia Dulford, who is from Camp Springs, Maryland, and is a TSA officer who's active in her local federal employees union. Thank you so much for being here. What's your question?
Thank you for having me. As the month November approaches, many of us are facing serious hardships as we enter week 3 of the shutdown. Some are at risk of eviction or mortgage default, and local rental companies and lenders have become silent or refused to work with employees presenting DHS debt letters. What protections or emergency actions can be taken to prevent these workers and their families from losing their homes during this time?
Well, thank you so much for your question. And particularly as a TSA employee, I represent LaGuardia Airport. And so yes, I know very, very well all the hard work that you all do and put in. And,
yes, ma'am.
And you all deserve a dignified workplace. You deserve a safe workplace. And you deserve the paycheck that you are working for. What I believe the best thing that we can do is to reopen the government right now and to ensure and to also call on our representatives and put pressure on individuals like the Speaker of the House to actually pick up the phone. The problem here is not that there is not even that there's a disagreement. It's that the Speaker of the House and the Trump administration refuses to even have a negotiation. They refuse to even pick up the phone and talk about this. And so I do not want us to start to agree with what Mike Johnson is saying and to have them preview for us and normalize the idea that everyone's just going to miss a paycheck, that 1 million federal workers are just going to go without that, and to just warn that in advance and to have us accept that. This is not acceptable. This is not normal. And what is normal is for us to negotiate. When one party wants the votes of another party, you negotiate, you come to a compromise, and you pass a bill. That is schoolhouse rock, and that is how things should be. So I thank you for that, and I want to make sure that we, of course, pass a bevy of federal protections for workers, but we don't want them to be necessary in the first place.
Yeah, and Senator Sanders, on that front, on government shutdowns before, obviously you've said before that you believe shutting down the government is a serious and dangerous action. You said that we must do everything possible to prevent it. What would you say to people who are missing their paychecks about why it's worth it now?
Well, let me just, first of all, thank you very much for your service, and we're going to do everything we can and move as quickly as we can to make sure you get your paychecks. But I want to just back up a little bit to discuss how we got to where we are, because I'm not sure everybody knows this. What Alexandria was just saying is in the House, majority rules, they pass the budget. In the Senate, not quite the case. It needs 60 votes, okay? That's been going on for a very long time. And the reason for the 60 votes is to encourage bipartisan negotiations, all right? Republicans have 53 people in their caucus. Democrats, including independents, have 47. You got to talk. This time, for the first time in history, what Republicans are saying, yeah, we don't have 60 votes. We're not talking to you, our way or the highway. And what we are saying, sorry, you got to sit down and talk to us. You got to deal with the healthcare crisis in this country.
Well, and they have both, Republicans have argued that Democrats should reopen the government and then they'll negotiate. Where do you both stand on that prospect?
I don't know. Based on their history, they've had months and months. This is not a new thing. Ever since Trump's big, beautiful bill was passed, we knew this was happening. They've refused to negotiate. And anyone thinks that tomorrow they'll suddenly start negotiating, I think is smoking what is illegal in many states.
Okay. On that front, let's get to our next question
more.
from the audience. Senator Sanders, this one's for you. This is Jeffrey Katz, who is a tax attorney from Potomac, Maryland, who says he's a Democrat who voted for President Trump in the last election. Jeffrey, what's your question?
Senator Sanders, you've said 50,000 people could die from ACA subsidy cuts. But right now, 1.4 million federal workers aren't getting paid. How do you justify choosing a fight over subsidies that might help people in the future over workers who are definitely suffering today?
Look, you are talking to, along with Alexandria, one of the strongest pro-worker members of the United States Congress. So we are going to fight for federal workers. And by the way, in terms of the AFTRA union, you are aware that our friend in the White House basically, in an unprecedented way, decided he wasn't going to have that union anymore, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to fight for federal employees. But what you just said about 50,000 people dying a year, this is based on studies done from the University of Pennsylvania and Yale. You take 15 million people off of their health care, by and large, low-income and working-class people, what do you think is going to happen to them? They don't go to a doctor. They have chronic problems. They will die. So this issue, and by the way, if I may, it's not only about health care. Do you know why we are in the situation we are today? Why do you think Trump and his friends made massive cuts to Medicaid and are forcing us to double premiums for the ACA? They gave the 1% in this country $1 trillion in tax breaks. $1 trillion in tax breaks at a time when we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in the history of this country. So I am not going to sit back and say, yeah, we're going to let 50,000 people die so that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and other multi-billionaires can get a tax break.
But can I ask you in terms of negotiations and what's realistic for the subsidies which expire at the end of December? Obviously, open enrollment starts November 1st. Over in the House, there are 14 House Republicans who have said that they will sign on and they will vote for a one-year extension of the subsidies. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said he thought that proposal was laughable. Do you think that's laughable, or is that something you could get behind?
Yeah, no, let me tell you why it's laughable. Because it's cynical. Republicans want to sign on to just a one little extra year of these ACA subsidies. You want to know why? What's happening next year? Midterm elections. They want to extend these subsidies just a year extra so that people don't realize the dupe that they are pulling on everyone, so that they can all reelect themselves and allow those things to expire the moment that they win re-election. And it is time to get politics out of what should be a guaranteed universal right in the United States of America, and that is health care. And so I will not accept a measly 1-year acceptance of a measly 1-year extension of the ACA. We need to make sure, and as a member of the party, we put negotiations in the hands of our party's leadership with Hakeem Jeffries. He says it's no, it's no. And we have to make sure that we are expanding and continuing the fight and not falling for the fine print, not falling for the tricks, and not falling for the politics around this.
If I could add to what Alexandria was saying, it's not just 15 million people losing their health insurance. And it's not just tens of millions of people seeing a doubling or a tripling in their premiums. Our healthcare system, and you guys can argue with me if you want, I think our healthcare system is broken. I think it is dysfunctional. And I think it's on the verge of collapse. And understand that when we talk about these massive cuts to healthcare from Trump and his friends, you're talking about cuts to nursing homes, you're talking about cuts to rural hospitals, you're talking about cuts to community health centers where 32 million people get their primary care. This system is on the verge of collapse. And I would hope that everybody in this room and everybody in America ask themselves a very simple question. Why is the United States, the richest country in the history of the world, the only major nation not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right?
So can I ask, if a 1-year extension you say is measly and doesn't cut it, what exactly do you want to see? What would you vote for?
Well, again, negotiations are all about a back and forth. And the idea of accepting something for nothing, I don't think is something that we're prepared to do. And by that, I mean, that requires Mike Johnson saying what he's willing to do and engaging in those negotiations with Hakeem Jeffries. And so this is a team sport. This is about making sure that we're all can come to something that we can agree with. So, I think we know what we will not accept, and what we will not accept is for these ACA premiums to skyrocket